Kal Kadosh, good evening. We are starting on Daf Yutet Amud Aleph. We're starting the new Perek, which is Perek Shavi, the 7th chapter. This is Daf Yutet 19a, where it starts in the Mishnah. So if you remember, we were talking about the different shofarot. The shofarot were basically the money, we're going to call them the tzedakah boxes of the once upon a time, that they were made in such a way that it was on the bottom much wider, and then it was more thinner on the top, so that way for the thieves or for the Ramaim, the cheaters, they, even if they would put their hand in, kilu, they're putting money in, they can't take out any money. So that's why it was made like a tzura v'shofar. And then we spoke about that there were 13 different shofarot, there were 6 of nidavah, this, that, and the 7 different ones, and so on and so forth. So now the Mishnah says, Ma'ot shenintzeu ben hashekalim lenidavah. What happens now if you find money in between the one of the shekalim, which is for the machatita shekel, and the ones of the nidavah, which basically means the first one was for the shekalim, the machatita shekel. The 13th one was for the nidavah, because the last 6 were for nidavah, right? So the number 1 and 13 are right beside each other, right? If you're going, whether it's in a circle or whatever. So basically he says, what happens if you're going to find money in between? You don't know if it's money that belongs to the shekel or money that belongs to nidavah. So karov le-shekalim, if it's closer in proximity to the shekalim, for shekalim. Le-nidavah, if it's closer to the nidavah, goes to the nidavah. Okay. Meksa and meksa, what happens exactly? It's exactly in the middle. So he says, yiplu le-nidavah. So it's going to go in the middle to the nidavah. If it's in the middle, it goes more to the nidavah. Right? The Gemara is going to explain why. Meaning, why is it that, the nidavah overtakes the shekalim? But okay. Now says the Gemara, ben etzim le-levona. That was between the number 1 and 13. What about number between the one, which is the 5th and the 6th, which is the wood for the mizbeach, and for the levona, so frankincense. So says the Gemara, im karov le'etzim, if it's going to be closer to the etzim, to the wood, right? So yiplu le'etzim, goes to the etzim. You levona, goes to the frankincense, goes to the frankincense. Meksa, if it's half, yiplu levona, it goes to levona, the frankincense. Ben kinin legozle ola. What about if it's the 3rd and the 4th one? Between the kinin, right? Which is, again, remember the kinim, or whether it's going to go to the kinim. There was a whole question whether it was kinim chova or not chova, but basically whether it was of the yoledet, the zav, the zava, right? The mitzora and the dal, all these things. So all of a sudden, if it was between the kinim and the gozle ola, so it says, if it's close to the kinim, close to the gozle ola, or gozle ola. Half, gozle ola. Okay, this goes now to the gozle ola. Okay, very good. Ben chulin le maaser sheni. Now we're going to be talking about chulin and maaser sheni. You have 2 boxes. One of them has chulin, and one of them has maaser sheni. Now, what happens is that this is outside of the Bet HaMikdash, not in the Bet HaMikdash, right? And now you don't know what it is. Is it chulin or is it maaser sheni? Maaser sheni, remember, is in years 1, 2, 4, 5, where you have to take a second 10% of your property, and you have to take that up to Israel to eat it in Eretz Yisrael, inside of Yerushalayim, not only in Israel, and in Yerushalayim. Now, the thing is that if you can't take up the fruits in itself, you redeem it, you add a 5th, the money you take up to Yerushalayim, and that's when you're going to have all your lafas and falafels and all your things like that in Eretz Yisrael. That's what you have the money for. Yeah? Okay. So now what happens is, if it's closer to chulin, it's chulin. Closer to...
And the shawarma.
Yeah, exactly. The shawarma and everything. Yeah? All the goodies of Eretz Yisrael. Yeah? The one that they're famous for. So if it's closer to chulin, chulin. Closer to maaser sheni, maaser sheni. Half, maaser sheni. Okay? Until here, we're fine. Yeah? This is a general rule. We always go to the closer one, even to be lenient. Because here, I would think to yourself, listen, you have chulin, maaser sheni, go stringent. The other ones, they're both stringencies. Whether it's going to go to an nidavah or machatzita shekel or gozle ola. So there I could say, what's the big deal? One, the other, it's all the same thing. Here, chulin, maaser sheni, go stringent. No, we go after the closest one, even to be lenient. However, though, if it's meksa, we always go to the stringent one. Whenever it's half, meaning that it's equal in proximity, we always go to the stringent one. That's what the Mishnah says. Okay? Fine. Says the Gemara. Lo tzricha dala. The Mishnah did not need to say this only when we're talking about between the shekalim, right, and the kinim, which are the number 2 and number 3. Because if you realize, in the Mishnah, we spoke about number 13 and number 1, correct? Which that was the first case. Then we spoke about number 5 and 6, right? Which was basically the concept of etzim and levona. And then we spoke about 3 and 4, which was kinim and gozle olah. But we didn't speak about number 2 and 3. Yeah, think about it. We did 13 to number 1. We did 5 and 6 and 3 and 4. What about 2 and 3? We didn't speak about it. Yeah, the other ones, which is basically 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, they're all the same. They're all nidavas. So there's no nafkamina. We don't have to mention it. But the ones that you do have to mention, which we did mention, was number 13 and number 1, which makes sense. Shekalim and nidava. Okay. Now, again, remember, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, all that you don't have to mention. It's all the same because I don't care if it's in between them. But now you have to mention 5 and 6, right? Because remember, 6 and 7 is right. So 5 and 6, and then 3 and 4. What about 2 and 3? We didn't mention it. So says the Gemara, lo tzrecha dela, right? Ben shekalim lekanim. We didn't have to mention between 3 and 4, 2 and 3. Says why? He says because those two shofarot are very, very distanced from each other. Because the shekalim is number 1, the nidava is at the end, right? So therefore, he comes and he says, so because of that, that's why we didn't have to mention them. Okay, so the concept of shekalim, which are tiklina tikim, and kinim, right, which are the two ones close to each other, we didn't have to mention it. Okay, fine. So why didn't we mention it? So says the Gemara, Rabbi Avu Meshem Rabbi Pinchas, Kemin Buchler Hayu Osim Asuyin, Kol HaShofarot were put like in a circle. So here we have a picture. I don't know if you guys have pictures in yours. So I'm going to show you my picture over here. This is the picture that you have in the article. Okay, so everyone sees the picture. So now I'll just explain to you the picture. You had Nedava, right, was over here. 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and number 7. Yeah, here you have the 7. So these are all Nedava. I don't know if you see clearly. These are all Nedava, the ones down here. These are all Nedava. Okay, these are all Nedava. Now, the number 13 and number 1 was closest to each other. So this is 13 Nedava, and this is number 1, which is the Shekalim Chadashim. So 13 and 1 is close to each other. Okay? Now you have the Teklina Tikin is between number 1 and number 2. And then you have the Kinin number 3, Gozle Olah number 4, Etzim 5, Levona 6. And number 7 is the Havla Kaporet. Okay, so the Mishnah was dana between number 13 and number 1. That's where the shaded area is. So between 13 and number 1, that's where the Mishnah spoke about. Also, the Mishnah spoke about between Kinin and Gozle Olah, which is between number 3 and number 4. And also between Etzim and Levona, which is 5 and 6. Okay? So now, what we're going to now speak about is that the Gemara is now going to ask, right, what about all the question marks? Right, which is basically between number 2 and 3, question mark, between number 2 and 3, between number 4 and 5, question mark, yeah, and between 6 and 7, question mark. Okay, so everyone understood. So we have all these cases, right? I hope you have the picture in front of you, so it makes it easier. So therefore, that's why he says the Gemara, so the first one and the last ones are actually close to each other. So that's why we spoke about it, okay? So now the Gemara is going to say the following, okay? This is number 1213. Okay. So now the Gemara is going to say this. So he says that the reason why the Gemara actually brought this case of number 1 and 13 was to teach you specifically that it's talking about that it went around in a circle. So that's why you had 13 and number 1 together, because if not, it doesn't exist. Saying if it was all in one straight line, there's no way that it's between number 1 and 13. Doesn't make sense. Number 1 is over there, 13 is over there. So obviously it had to be that it's done in a circle, right? And that's the way that they did it. Okay. Now says the Gemara. Okay. Mechza lemechza, we said Yiplul and Nedava. If it was between the Shekalim and Nedava, it goes to the Nedava. So says the Gemara, we skip out the brackets. Okay, there was a question here actually. So says the Gemara, It Dabai Meimar. Some people wanted to say that the reason why it goes for the Nedava is Shema Yiplul Sherei Lishka, is because the leftovers of these Shekalim, they're going to go to the leftovers, to the Sherei Lishka, for the wall and the cities. Now they're not used for korbanot. Now we said therefore it's always better to do it as a Nedava, because a korbanot where the Nedavot were always for Ketzah Mizbeach. So therefore, it's always better to give it to a korban than to bedek habayit. The leftover of the shekalim go towards the walls and the towers. So that's not for the korbanot. But nidavot don't go to that. Don't go to bedek habayit. The korbanot always go for a korban. So therefore, it's better to go to a nidavah than to go to the shekalim. Eat the b'avim. And somebody wanted to say another reason. Mechza is kemi shemet. Mechza is that after you already went and you separated the shekel, and then all of a sudden now, if we don't know where, so what? It's like a person died. So if a person died, his shekel doesn't go to the shekalim anymore. It goes to the nidavah, right? Bezamar Rabbi Yasa. Ad Dana Tamam, when I was there, I actually heard Shamin call. We heard a call of Rabbi Yehuda Shali Shmuel. He free shiklo met. What happens if a person separates the machzit shekel and then he dies? Amalei yiplun in nidavah, goes to nidavah. So same thing. It's like the guy died because we don't know where did it go to. So therefore, did it go to the shekel? Did it go to nidavah? Give it as a nidavah. Yeah, Shmuel. A similar case. A sirita efa shelo. What happens if a kohen gadol? He separated money for the sirita efa, and then after he already purchased it, there's leftover his monies. So says the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Yodichem Yam Melech, throw it out in the Yam Melech, in the Dead Sea." But Rabbi Lazar says, "No, you throw it to nidavah. You blew in nidavah." So says the Gemara, Vekashia. So we have the question, right? Why? Because now we're going to go back. So that's the reason why it goes to nidavah, not shekalim. But now we're going to go back between the kinim and the gozle olah, which was number kinim and gozle olah, number 3 and 4. Okay, so the Gemara is going to ask, Vekashia, right there, what do we say? It goes for the gozle olah. So it says, the Gemara says, Vekashia, v'yesh chatat kreva olah. Does there exist a chatat can become an olah? A chatat can never become an olah. So if you have right now a kinin, part of the kinin you had a chatat and an olah. Now, if you have a doubt, where do you put it? Where do you put it now? To the gozle olah. You can never bring a chatat as an olah, right? So how does it work? So answers the Gemara, Rabbi Chizkiah b'shem Shimon Lakish, Tanai betin hu al hamotarot sheikirvu olah. It's a Tanai betin. Betin come and they make a condition at the beginning that they're going to bring it as olot. They're going to bring it as burnt offerings. Okay? So says the Gemara, Hayisha azot, this woman, b'may mitkaperet. Right? In what is she going to be atoned exactly? Because at the end of the day, if they didn't bring the chatat, the sin offering under her, so how's she going to be atoned? So answers the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, says Rabbi Yitzchak, T'nai betinu, T'nai betin. Right? I'm sapek et hakinin, whom is sapek et psulot. He says somebody that's going to sell the kinim, the birds for the kinim, for the Bet HaMikdash, he himself is going to give the gozalot, the extra ones, in order to switch the ones which became pasul, and therefore he's going to be makneotam, that they're going to be a tzedek chovah. So says now the Gemara, okay, fine. What about the other 3 cases? We only brought down 3 cases between the shekalim and the nidavah, which was number 1 and 13. Between number 3 and 4, kinim and gozleola. Between 5 and 6, etzim lelevona. What about every other case? So says the Gemara, lo tzurcha de la gozleola leetzim. I didn't have to tell you between the gozleola and the etzim between 4 and 5, or between the lelevona and the lezav kaporet and 6 and 7. Why not? Utznita besofa, but we did teach it in the general rule. Right? What was the general rule? We go after the closest one, even to be lenient. But if not, if it's mechza, we always go lachmin. So therefore, that's why we're always going to go lachmin in all those cases, if I don't have to teach you all the other cases, because we know what the chumrah is in each case, and that's it. Okay? Fine. Very, very good. Says the new Mishnah. Halakha bet. Okay? Says the Mishnah bet. It says, Ma'ot shenimtzeu lifnei sochrei behema. What happens now if you find in Yerushalayim money in front of people that they're selling animals? Now, leolam maaser, for sure it's maaser sheni. Why? People are buying there with money of maaser sheni, so for sure it's maaser sheni money. It's not chuli money. Now, if the money is going to be found on Harabait, says the Mishnah, chulin, it's going to be chulin, and you could use it whatever you want. Yeah, you found it, you could use it whatever you want. Uvi Yerushalayim, if it's in Yerushalayim, right? If it's going to be in the shuki, in the shvakim, in the marketplaces there, Beshat kol yomot hashana, if it's the rest of the year, it's always chulin. If it's Beshat regel, it's always going to be Maaser Sheni. Why? Because people are doing Aliyah regel, so for all the money is probably Maaser Sheni. If it's during the year, no, everyone has regular money, so therefore it's regular money. If you find meat in the Azara, and we do not know if it's from the Kohanim or not, so it says Levarim, right? Just like if it's going to be cut up in limbs, so then it's olot, it's burnt offerings. V'chatichot, if it's going to be cut up in small pieces of meat, it's chataot, it's a chatat. In Yerushalayim, if it's going to be found in Yerushalayim, doesn't matter whether it's going to be in Evarim or chatichot, it's always going to be zivchei shlamim. It's always going to be zivchei shlamim. Zeh vezeh, which are the peace offerings. says zeh v'zeh, whether it's meat or whatever, whether it's found in Yerushalayim or not, it's not going to be brought in the mizbeach, right? Or going to be eaten like a chatat or a shlamim, right? To bar tzurato, you have to wait, right? You have to wait until it becomes rotted. It loses its tzura and becomes pasul, and then yetzeh levet asrifa, which means whether it's meat which is found in the Azara or in Yerushalayim, it's not going to be brought onto the mizbeach, right? Or eaten like a regular shlamim, because maybe be'emet it already passed the time. And if it already passed the time, how are you eating the korban? So if you have to wait until tu bar tzurato, you take it out to bet asrifa and you burn it. In sabig vulin, if it was found outside of Yerushalayim, so if it was evarim, so that for sure it's a nevela. Yeah, and you're not allowed to eat it at all. Okay? Why? Because basically, since it's not fitting for anything, so therefore you would have to basically, give it to the dogs or sell it to the goyim. It's going to be mutar. But if it's pieces, so then it's mutar, right? But then it's usually for in order to consume, to consume. During the time of the regalim, that there's so much meat, even the evarim are going to be permitted. Okay, so we just finished the Mishnah. So says the Gemara in Yutet Amud Bet on the top, the second line says the Gemara like this: Lo tzorcha dela behar habayit kodesh. The Mishnah did not have to mention that money which is found on Har Habayit is kodesh, right? Why not? At the end of the day, you have a lot of money of kodesh there, so why don't we say that it's actually kodesh, and therefore it belongs to whether it's a Trumat Lishka, whatever. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Ba, Rabbi Chia b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Ba, the name of Rabbi Chia, the name of Yochanan. Chazaka shen kohen motzi min alishka ma'ot ad shu mechalelan ala be'ema. There's a chazaka, the parnas, the one that's the gizbar, the one that's in charge, like the treasurer of the Ekdesh. He never takes out money from the Trumat Lishka outside of the Azara. If he already doesn't deconsecrate it, he's already going to be mechalel on an animal, which means that he's already going to switch it. So now that money is not kodesh anymore. Because if you already found it outside of the Azarot, for sure it wasn't kodesh anymore. Okay? So therefore, that's what we said, that if you found the money outside, obviously we're not the one in the Azara, we're talking about an Har Habayit, it's not going to be kodesh, because for sure he already was mechalel the money, deconsecrated, made it that it's not holy anymore, and therefore the animal was holy instead of the money. Okay? Good. Says the two dots, but if there's going to be meat found in the Azara, if it's going to be limbs, it's olot. If it's going to be pieces, it's going to be chataot. In Yerushalayim, it's zivchei shlamim, it's peace offerings. Right, whatever the case is, you have to wait until it gets rotten, and then you're going to take it out to Bet HaSerfa. Says Rabbi Elazar b'Shem Rav Oshaya, hisi adat. If right now a person had hesech adat, which means that he stopped having his mindset to making sure that something doesn't become tameh, what happens is taun ibur tzura. You have to wait until it becomes rotten. That's called ibur tzura. It loses its tzura, its form. So Amar Rav Oshaya says Rav Oshaya, matznita amra ken. Our Mishnah already said this. But the Mishnah said, "Tu bar tzurato v'yetzel lebet hasrfa." You have to wait until it's me'ubar tzurato, loses its form, its shape, and then you're going to take it out to get burnt. Okay. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef, says Rabbi Yosef, Yaut, and the reasoning of the Mishnah is also good. Leochlo and atayachol, you can't actually eat it. Shemanit kalkel tzurato, because maybe be'emet it already was after the night, and therefore it's considered notar. It's leftovers, right? Now you can't burn it immediately because maybe be'emet it didn't go over the night, and therefore you can't burn something which wasn't pasul. So lefum ken, therefore, you have to say, that's the reasoning why. Meaning maybe it's within the day, so you can't burn it for no reason. Maybe it's after the day, so you can't eat it. So you can't eat it, you can't burn it. What do you have to do? Wait until it's me'ubar tzurato, and now you burn it. Okay. Next, two dots. Nimtza b'gvulin, if you found the meat in the gvulin. So we said if it's limbs, it's in nevilot. Yeah, if it's going to be pieces, it's going to be probably muteret, permitted. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Krispa b'Shem Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, says Rabbi Krispa in the name of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, evarim or nevelot, lokim alem mishum nevela, which means that the kavanah is not that it's only just asur to eat the meat because it's a chashash, it's a suspicion, maybe it's a nevela. The kavanah is that's for sure it's a nevela. And therefore, if a person is going to eat it, he gets lashes like he ate a nevela. What's a nevela? An animal that wasn't a carcass that died, an animal that died without shechita. That's a nevela. Doesn't mean it's a non-kosher animal. It could be 100% a kosher animal. But it died without shechita. That's called a nevela. So the fact that you found it that way, it's for sure a nevela. Somebody that eats it, he gets lashes. Umatzrita amraken, and our Mishnah said it. Why? Evarim are nevelot, v'chatichot are mutarot. Chatichot mutarot, lo mamash. It doesn't mean the mamash it's going to be mutar. For sure it's going to be mamash. So when, just like you said that it's going to be permitted to eat the chatichot, and you said that the evarim are considered nevelot, so it's for sure nevelot. Just like chatichot, you're for sure permitted to eat it. So two nevelot are for sure nevelot, and therefore you will get lashes. Velokim aleim mishum nevela. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Krispa b'shem Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina, imayu machrozot, right? If the evarim are going to be charuzim al chut, which means that they're going to be on a string. That means you found the meat on a string. So he says mutarot, it's going to be permitted. Why? Because you would never put meat of a nevela on one of these strings, like to put like nowadays they put them on pinchitos, they put them on these skewers and all these things. So you had them like on a string like that. You had all the pieces of meat. It's not normal to do that by a nevela, and therefore it's going to be permitted. Okay, says the Gemara. Teisha chanuyot. We learned this in Psachim. We learned this in many different places. Ketubot. You have nine stores. They are selling non-kosher meat. Teisha chanuyot mochro basar nevela. One store is selling basar shechuta. Nitchalfulo, all of a sudden, you don't know where you bought the meat from. Right? You went in, there was a marketplace. There's one kosher store, 9 non-kosher butchers. One kosher butcher. You went in, you bought meat, you come out, and all of a sudden you're looking and you're, 1 second, something's wrong. Where did I buy the meat from? And you're looking, and I have no idea. I don't know where I went. And there's no signs. I bought it from one of them. They all gave it to me with the same thing. There's no simanim, no nothing. I have no way of knowing. Where did I buy it from? So says the Gemara, nitchalfulo, choshesh, you have to be choshesh that maybe you bought it from one of the ones of the nevela, which means we're not going to say that it's for sure a nevela, right? And you're not going to get lashes if you actually ate it, right? But rather it's a safek nevela, safek not. So because of that, we have to be machmir because it's a safek doraita. It's a doubt in the Torah, from the Torah. Velanin said, now if you found it, we go after the majority. So since we go after the majority, for sure it's a nivela. Because there's nine non-kosher stores. For sure it's a nivela. So therefore if you eat it, you're going to get lashes. Says the Gemara, what about the opposite? 9 are kosher stores. There's only one non-kosher store. Yeah? That's like I'm going to say here in Harding. Right? How many kosher restaurants opposite to the non-kosher restaurants? Yeah? So in certain areas, you got much more non-kosher. Here, you got probably much more kosher. So what do? Yeah? Here on this part of Harding, it's true. All of them are kosher except for the Italian one down here, no? You have Cafe Vert, Rustico, Backyard, the other one, I forgot, the soup kitchen, I don't remember what type of kitchen. You've got Harbor Grill, the Rita, okay, let's talk about only restaurants. Tapas 26, and then you have kosher. They're all kosher. Yeah? How many non-kosher do you have? You have probably the majority kosher. No? You guys agree or no? Yeah? So you have Teisha Chanuyot, 9 stores which are selling kosher meat, and 1 which is selling nevela. Nitchalfulo, again, he doesn't know. Choshesh, he's suspecting. Why? Maybe he bought it from the Safek nevela one, and therefore he's not. It's only a doubt, so therefore he doesn't get lashes, right? But if you found it, we go after the majority, and therefore you're allowed to even eat it. If you found it, you're allowed to eat it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Haninsa b'yanochri, but what happens if you found it in the hand of a goy? So it's like you found it in the Reshut Rabim, and therefore we go after the majority of the stores. So if the majority of the stores are Jewish, so you're allowed to eat it, even though it's found in them. Meaning the goy has it in his hand, right? And there's no signs. So I'm going to say if the majority butchers are Jewish, it probably came from the Jewish stores. Rabbi, right? Rabbi Lazar, Bei, Rabbi Chagai, Mismach, Rabbi Mana. He was somech at Rabbi Mana, which means he was somech on him, right? When he was walking, he was like leaning on him, so he was his support. Yeah, he saw the goy that he was cutting the pisot, the basar, meat from his horse, and he was taking it to sell. Amarle, he went and he said, Hadaida Amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is what Rabbi Yochanan comes and he says, if you're going to find it in the hand of the goy, it's like finding it in the marketplace. He says, look, the goy is cutting it off the horse and he's selling it, horse meat. Amalei said, Ken Amar Rabbi Yossi Rebbe. This is what Rabbi Yossi Rebbe said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. No. Not that just the goy has it in his hand and he's selling it, but that for sure could be non-kosher meat. We're talking about that we saw him coming out of a place where all the Jews are the butchers there. So therefore, even though there are, right, also goyim there, what happens is that there he's coming out from the, not just that you find a goy coming and selling you meat. A goy coming and selling you meat, he's selling you non-kosher. We're talking about that he's coming out of a place where there's a lot. So now I have a doubt: is it kosher, non-kosher, right? But if he's just stum, you find a goy with meat in his hand, for sure that's not kosher. Okay. A person went in Tzipori, he wanted to buy meat from the tabach, from the marketplace, from the butcher. He didn't want to give it to him, right? Why? Because they hated each other, so he didn't want to give it to him. I don't like you. I don't like your face. I'm not going to sell you meat. No meat for Yom Tov. That's it. That's the way it is. So what happened? Amar le lechad romai, he went and he told the goy, yeah, ve'aitile, right? And the goy brought him the meat. So he went, he told the boy, a goy, go buy meat from that kosher store and give it to me. And that's what he did. And he brought him the meat, right? All of a sudden, Amar le, he went and he said, lana spital kurche, right? What? I didn't help me at all. I went and I got it from the goy against your will. You think you're able to outsmart me? The goy came in and he bought it. Amar le, he said, velab basar nevela diavile. So what? And I didn't give him basar nevela? Meaning, what the hell? You think you actually got me? I got you. I sold him basar nevela. So he went and he said, Rabbi Yomi Abishem Rochanina, Maaseh ba lifnei Rabbi, they came in front of Rabbi. Ve'amar lo kula minei mesar mikulin tzipurin. He says he cannot come and prohibit all the meat and all the tlazim of tzipurin that day, because since the majority of the tabachim of the city were Jews, I'm going to say that he got kosher meat. So because he got kosher meat, it's kosher, and he's allowed to actually eat it. So the guy has no rights of coming and saying that he sold him a nevela and that's it. No, you got kosher meat. Okay, another right concept of the chumra of Rav in these things. Rav Nachal Etaman, Rav went down to Bavel. Chamtun Mekilini saw that they were coming and there was a lot of basashin itale minayin. Basashin itale minayin means that all of a sudden they don't know what happened to the meat. Yeah, you left the meat there. You went somewhere, you came back, you left the meat unattended. Right? You can't leave meat unattended. So what happened? Chamar alehen. So he was machmir on them. Chad bar Nashazil, there was somebody that he went, yeah, Kaf Amud Aleph on the top, 28:1 on the top. So he wanted to come and he wanted to rinse it out, right, in the river. So he forgot it there and he went down, right? Basically, he forgot the meat and he went. Yeah? Chazar bay misimna. He came back to take it. Amale Rav, Rav said, Asulach, you can take it. Why? Then I'm going to say, your piece of meat went into the river. And there's another piece, which is the nevela instead of it. So the Gemara is going to speak about this. But basically, we're going to start speaking about the concept of basar shenita leminayin, right? So therefore, that's the entire concept of meat, which is hiding from, and this is very important, by the way, because there were many stories on the plane, the famous story in the plane, that the goy came, he switched the meat, this and that, but there are many stories of this, but this is the concept of basar shenita leminayin. We continue Bezrat Hashem tomorrow.